everybody, to our second Pastoring in a Pandemic. We're so glad to have you all here with us. So glad to have everyone who hopped on the Zoom link. Want to apologize on the top end. We had a little mishap with the Zoom link. Your RSVP had the link from last week, so sorry about that. But we rushed to try to get it emailed out to you all. So thank you, everyone who was able to see that link and grab it. I just want to give a quick shout out to our participants, all the people that we have joining us so far on our live Zoom link. I see Brenda Smith. How you doing? And when I shout you out, matter of fact, if you can just jump in the chat and just put in either where you're from, where you're joining us from, or the name of your congregation or organization. We would love to just know who's with us. But I see Brenda Smith. I see Bailey Kamal. I see Carol A. Watson. Denise Eugenie, good to see you once again. Etta Anderson. I have an email address, flavant@uu.edu. Reverend Gerald Britt, good to see you. Glenkey Redrick, Herbert Coleman, Jonathan Higgins, what's up, man? Good to see you. Joyce Brooks, oh, what's up, Joyce? I'm so glad you're here. Karen Mackey, Kanisha Caldwell, Larry Towell Crudup, Leo Brown, Michelle Logan, Shauna Stevens, Shara Gatson. I see Minister Stacy joining us again, Tamara Minter joining us again, and Todd Schmeekel joining us once again. So glad you all were able to hop in. We're really, really excited about this conversation, about our ability to just talk about what does it look like to begin to build the beloved economy, and more importantly, today, what does it look like for people of faith, particularly Black people of faith, to begin thinking about economics in a new way, right? And leading our community in that fight. Today, we're really going to be focusing on something very particular, and that is an economic bill of rights. We know that, this is not something that a lot of people talk about. It's not something that a lot of people, discuss readily. But an economic bill of rights is something that's been being talked about in our history, in the civil rights movement for quite some time, and in the history of our country, all the way going back to 1944. And so before we just jump into this thing, we want to sort of level set, right? So we got some really, really smart people. I always say I got to get people who are smarter than me to be able to talk about some of these things. And so we have with us today none other than Dr. Michael Green, economist and professor at Paul Quinn College. And alongside him, we also have Dr. Theo Walker, who is a professor at Southern Methodist University and Perkins School of Theology. And they're going to take the first few minutes to sort of level set for us and help us understand what is an economic bill of rights and what is the history of it. So they're going to take a few minutes and do that. And so I'm going to just jump in. I'm going to start by throwing a question to Dr. Theo Walker. And the question is, sir, so with this whole economic bill of rights and the history of it, we're not going to be able to grab it all in a few minutes, but can you just maybe explain for us what are the most important principles or tenets of an economic bill of rights? Reverend Dr. Walker?
Good afternoon, or it's still morning. Good morning, everyone. Quiet as it's kept, starting in 1963 and culminating in 1967, Martin Luther King Jr. advanced the idea of an economic bill of rights, particularly in his 1967 book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? There, Martin Luther King Jr. argued that in order to avoid increasing chaos and to achieve community, particularly beloved community, we would need to abolish poverty. Now, those of us who've not read Martin Luther King Jr. are likely to have never even heard the phrase abolition of poverty. But King thought that abolishing poverty was essential to developing community. And to that end, King wanted to go beyond civil rights. That is, civil rights are about political rights that attach to U.S. citizenship, such as voting rights. King advocated going beyond civil rights to pursue economic rights, and part of that included advancing an economic bill of rights. He was talking about amending the U.S. Constitution, adding an economic bill of rights. And this economic bill of rights would have full employment programs, federally funded programs. In many instances, the federal government would need to create new forms so that people could be well paid. And in addition to that, King wanted to supplement full employment policies with a guaranteed income, a guaranteed income. In contemporary language, we usually use the term UBI, Universal Basic Income. So King prescribed a guaranteed income, and the difference between King prescribing a guaranteed income and the rest of us is that when King said guaranteed income, he meant guaranteed good income rather than guaranteed poor income. Now, at this moment in our history, this is a moment in which people are unusually willing or able to appreciate the wisdom of having a guaranteed income. And so if we're going to advance an economic bill of rights as prescribed by Martin Luther King Jr., now is the best time in history to advance that idea.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker. And so hear what he said, right? I want to start with the first thing that he said. We're not talking about simply like gathering a bunch of people and just simply like holding up signs or yelling and screaming. No, we're talking about amending the Constitution of the United States of America, right? That's what we're talking about. And we didn't just pick this up out of nowhere, right? Like there's a history. This goes all the way back to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, into Dr. King and through. So we're picking up the baton. To that end, Doc Green, can you talk to us a bit more? We know that amending the Constitution and the people, right, pushing for something is never an easy thing in our country. So can you talk to us a bit more about the historical and contemporary advocacy efforts, right, that were in support of an economic Bill of Rights?
Yeah, the first thing that I want to draw your attention to is that tomorrow we should be getting the most recent jobs report. We anticipate that the aggregate level of unemployment will be the highest it's been since the Great Depression. Probably 16, 17%. And for Black folk and brown folk, that number is going to be substantially higher. I say that because it underscores the moment that we're in and the urgency of thinking and strategizing around, as Dr. Walker mentioned, abolition of poverty as proposed in Economic Bill of Rights. We have always been involved in this discussion. So even though, obviously in the modern period, we talk about Franklin Delano Roosevelt rightly, but we, Black folk, have always been involved in this discussion. The first Black recipient of a PhD in economics was a woman, Sadie Mosley Tanner Alexander. And in 1945, she gave a speech at Florida A&M that embraced the idea of an economic Bill of Rights. In 1972, the Caucus of Black Economists also put forward a economic Bill of Rights. And more recently, we have economists like William Darity and Derek Hamilton advocating and pushing this notion of an economic Bill of Rights. And this economic Bill of Rights is predicated upon the notion that, as Dr. Walker talked about, these aren't civil rights, these are human rights. And economic rights is a subspecies, if you will, of human rights. And that there are certain rights that we are entitled to simply because we are human. And the economic Bill of Rights, and that's going to be a right to a job, and a right to a job at a livable wage. So in academia, there's been Black intellectuals and Black academicians who have been talking about this for some time. In the area of politics, right? And I believe somewhere in the mid-1970s, Augustus Hawkins teamed up with Senator Humphrey to put forward a full employment bill. For instance, Cory Booker, that was part of his program. I don't think he pushed it nearly enough. So in academia and in politics, we have been involved. And not only in that, in the area of social activism, we have been involved. Bayard Rustin presented the Freedom Budget on behalf of his mentor, A. Philip Randolph, that talked about the fundamental tenets of an economic Bill of Rights. The Black Panther Party, right? If you look at their 10-point program, talks about certain economic rights, including the right to full employment. The Black Youth Project 100, if you look at their platform, they embrace and talk about an economic Bill of Rights. The Black Lives Matter movement not only talked about stopping the killing of unarmed Black men by police, but they also talked about the fundamental tenets of economic Bill of Rights in full employment in particular. And so all of these are, this whole notion of an economic Bill of Rights runs through the thread of much Black political, theological, and social thinking in academia and politics and in the area of activism. So I think the Black Dallas Clergy it is excellent that we are doing this. Now, if you notice, and I'm gonna pull this to a close right here, every single entity or person that I listed on this selective list is Black. And I do that for underscoring the reason that we have a vested interest in this, and that we have not merely been recipients and silent partners. We have shaped this dialogue up until today. And so there are contemporary efforts that are still going on, and I think that when the Dallas Black Clergy, when we're putting together this and we're getting together and we're having people involved, it's important to remember that we are drinking from a deep well, and that we are part of a lineage that's reflected in academia, that's reflected in politics, that's reflected in social activism. We are not alone in calling for an economic Bill of Rights.
Thank you so much, Dr. Green. Thank you so much, Dr. Walker. I hope that helped you all sort of frame where we're going and how we're doing this. Once again, thank you all for joining us, those who hopped in. This is being recorded, it's being live, so you can always go back and hear some of that level setting and getting us prepared. But I also want to just help us understand that this conversation and how we're leading, we're Dallas Black Clergy, just pastors that got to try to just be pastors, try to continue to move a social justice platform and a platform for the full inclusion of people who look like us, who love like us, and who have been left out and pushed aside in our community. And so if you want to read more about that, hear more about the work we do, you can go to DallasBlackClergy.com. You can check that out. You can also see the video from 2 weeks ago, our last conversation, where we started this conversation about building the beloved economy. But as we continue this conversation about moving towards an economic bill of rights, what we really want to do is we want to begin to share with you all what the actual tenets of the economic bill of rights. And so as I share my screen with you, that is not what I wanted to do. As I begin to present, as I share my screen with you, the Economic Bill of Rights has 5 basic tenets, right? The first one, a meaningful job at a living wage for every employable citizen, all right? A meaningful job at a living wage for every employable citizen. The next is a secure and adequate income for all who cannot find jobs or for whom employment is not inappropriate, all right? The next is access to land as a means to income and livelihood, all right? The next, access to capital as a means of full participation in the economic life of America. And lastly, but definitely not least, unfettered access to the civic process, recognition by law of the right of people affected by government programs to play a significant role in determining how they are designed and carried out. I want to say that one again because it's a little convoluted, right? So basically, recognition by law of the right of all people affected by government programs. That means if you are affected by any program that the government puts in place, you should be able to play a significant role in determining how those programs are designed and how they're carried out. And so these are the basic Economic Bill of Rights. And we want you to understand them and hear them. This is what our people have been fighting for since we stepped foot or were brought in change, right, to this land. That's what we've been fighting for. And so we want to turn the conversation, and we're going to continue to talk about this Economic Bill of Rights. But because we're clergy and because we're pastors, we always want to help people understand, how do people of faith talk about this? How does your pastor get up and preach a message, preach a sermon? How do you all talk about this in your Bible studies and in your small groups? And to that end, we have a cadre of awesome pastors, and they're going to begin to share with us. How to preach on an economic bill of rights. And so first we have Reverend Pastor Fia Kennedy, and she's going to be talking about a meaningful job at a living wage. She's going to be coming from Matthew 20, verses 1 and 8, and I'll read them for you. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. When the evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first. I present to you all Reverend Fia Kennedy.
Morning, everyone. In Matthew 21 through 16, we have another episode of story time with Jesus. The Lord is poetically preaching about inclusiveness, grace, and even covetousness. This parable compares the kingdom of heaven with the landowner's hiring practices. Considering Dr. Green's book, A Way Out of No Way, he states full employment is that situation where jobs at decent pay are available for all those who are ready, willing, and able to work. Kingdom mindset and a beloved economy is a radical redistribution of power. The kingdom of heaven sounds like, to me, economic fairness beating djembe drums of justice into cold hearts of greed and control. I just believe that the 1% with better tax breaks do not serve us well. Nepotism above qualification does not serve us well. Minorities pushed to the margins by patriarchy and privilege does not serve us well. Allowing tenure in the vineyard to devalue those new to the body does not serve the beloved community well. Tokenism is not colorblind. He will hire Black and brown persons last and scrape the remnant of the budget for the salary. For we are collectively praying. When we are truly collectively praying, we will say, Lord, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I declare the only type of poverty we will have are the poor in spirit. Allow me to poetically preach this. People should not struggle to live because of bad proverbial houses of cards. Let's make a deal. Refine the New Deal Roosevelt dealt. Let the eradication of all poverty on all levels be the real deal. Those who have eyes to see call a spade a spade. Pure hearts will always trump jokers. Kings and queens do not mind fighting for 15. Gender pay are bridged at the gaps. Disparities are diminished by a holy royal flush. Jack and Jills are employed and compensated on level fields. Yeah, returning citizens are no longer overlooked. Playing corporate bid whiz, checking boxes, their positions reneged because they were handcuffed and booked. A beloved economy will no longer have unscrupulous HR clubs who discriminate on how employees look. Diversity of faces have value. A beloved economy will no longer profile by name, zip codes, or age. 2 forms of ID, a drug test, you're good. Your character is more important than a color of your skin. The kingdom of heaven is like a full house, and equity has upped the ante and called your bluff. In the spirit of my living Savior, my God, and even Oprah, you get a denarius, you get a denarius. You just got here, but you get a denarius as well. We must continue to work for meaningful jobs at a living wage for every employable citizen. May God bless you.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Kennedy, for sharing with us about a meaningful job at a living wage. Everybody, just like Oprah said, everybody gets a denarius. Everybody gets a job. Everybody gets a living wage. The next conversation we want to talk about is a secure and adequate income. And that'll come to us from Pastor Marcus King. He's going to be looking at Isaiah, the 1st chapter and the 17th verse. Simply says, learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, and plead for the widow. Pastor King.
If I had a title today, I would entitle it, You Gonna Learn Today. And that's a phrase used to describe the pressure being put on a person or a group or a country who won't get it together. As we talk about a secure and adequate income for all who cannot find jobs or for whom employment is not inappropriate, we must understand Isaiah is God's prophet who brings a case against this nation because they have failed to exercise godly morals and ethics. In essence, he uses his prophet Isaiah to express his disdain with the disparities, even economic disparities amongst the people. He points out in the text today in verse 17, he points out 3 things that this nation needs: in education, they need people involved in exploration, and of course, the people need vindication. This country, America, seemingly has a learning disability called ADHD. We get attention deficit disorder because whenever we begin to discuss justice for the oppressed, we shift the conversation and don't get consistent movement. Parents who cannot care for themselves when they are not old enough or too old or disabled, had a child and need time off to bond with that child without the concerns of losing wages. We also still discriminate against those who are re-entering society and have paid their debts but stay in debt because they can't find proper employment. There needs to be a funding for income across the board where it is inappropriate for them to work. Some people should not have to work because of their disabilities, and the country should stand up. The reason grandma still has to have a job at Walmart being used to highlight low prices is because this country keeps failing her with low standards by crippling her with anemic resources. Taking care of the least of these is the least, not the last thing we should do. America needs an education. We got to learn to do good. America needs those engaged in exploration. We need justice seekers to continue to make sure good happens. And America's vulnerable need vindication. help the oppressed, defend the cause of the orphan, fight for the rights of the widows when they kill their Black and brown husbands, leaving them with the debt of funerals and day-to-day living. Until we get it together, our mantra as justice seekers is to press and let America know you're going to learn today.
You're going to learn today. Thank you so much, Pastor King. We're going to learn today. We will have secure and adequate income for all of our people, and grandmama and them ain't going to have to work at Walmart for low wages, for low prices. I love that. The next conversation we're going to have is talk about is access to land, and that'll be given to us by Pastor Camilla Hall Sharp. She's going to talk to us from Judges, the 1st chapter, 14 through 15, and it simply says, when she came to him, she urged him to ask her father for a field. As she dismounted from her donkey, Caleb said to her, "What do you wish?" She said to him, "Give me a present, since you have set me in the land of the Negev. Give me also Galoth Mayim." So Caleb gave her Upper Galoth and Lower Galoth. Pastor Camilla Hall Sharp.
Let us pray. God, we thank you. Move me so you can move free. In Jesus' name. This is the story of Axa, the daughter of Caleb, being used as a pawn by her father for economic and political gain. She demands, though, that her new husband ask for more, which was not usual in her culture. But when Othniel does not open his mouth, she shows up and tells her father, "You gave us a little piece of land on the south side, but that's not going to be enough for us to survive. We need more. Give me access to clean water and land so we can survive and thrive." Now, here we are thousands of years later, and people are still making deals that impact the lives of folks without talking to the people, without taking into consideration what they need to survive and thrive. And they're doing it for political and economic gain. You see racism, redlining, and rackets continue to push Black and brown people to south sides all over this country, limiting our access to land and clean water. We know that Black-owned businesses don't get the same terms as the other businesses when they want to buy property. Black households have a median income of about $40,000, while whites are 68, and Black home ownership stays around 40, and white is well over 70%. As a result, Black people, particularly Black women, suffer in high rates of poverty in this country. See, when we don't have access to land and clean water, it impacts our ability to survive and to thrive. But see, in the passage here today, Axa understands the game being played with her life and her livelihood. She sees that Othniel will not open up his mouth on her behalf, and she decided not to watch the game, but to insert herself as a new player. Axa shows up. She got up off the donkey and she demanded what she needed. See, like Axa, we can no longer watch the game being played with our lives. We can't wait for someone else to ask for what we need. We have to show up and demand what we need in order to survive. And it's not like they don't know what we need to survive, though. But here in the United States of Amnesia, they forgot the promise about life, liberty, and, pursuit of happiness. They forgot about 40 acres and a mule. They forgot they said that all people are created equal. Although that promise wasn't necessarily for us, we know that we are created in the image of God, so we get in on the promise. But see, when Axa shows up and demands what she needs, although wasn't how things done, Caleb gave her what she needed. And she does not leave empty-handed. See, I believe it's time we show them and land and access to clean water that we need to survive and to thrive. And we can't leave until we get what we need. Amen.
Amen. We ain't leaving until we get what we need, y'all. We not leaving until we get what we need. I love that. Thank you so much, Reverend Camilla Hall Sharp. Our next conversation is access to capital. Access to capital, and that's going to be given to us by Pastor Michael Waters, coming from Matthew 25, 14 through 15. And it simply says, "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away." Pastor Michael Waters.
Let us hold something. In the 25th chapter of the Matthean Gospel, Jesus tells successive parables meant to illuminate the character of the parousia and the breaking forth of the kingdom of heaven. In the latter parable, Jesus tells of a man preparing for a lengthy odyssey. Before his departure, he places capital funding in the hands of his employees with the ultimate expectation of receiving a return on his investment. Upon his later return, the man celebrates or denigrates his employees relative to how effective they were in managing and growing his assets while he was away. Now, typically, this is the penultimate focus of the analysis and exegesis of this text, the consideration of how effective these employees were in managing and growing the capital entrusted to them. However, the text begs from us an inquiry of who initially gave this man access to capital in the first place, such that he can later have the ability to reinvest that capital for future gains. For far too long in our community, we have been shut out from the very acquisition of capital to start, sustain, and grow our business interests. Redlining measures have permanently stamped our communities as not approved, while conversely opening up the floodgates of economic opportunity to our less melanated brothers and sisters. Now, our dear South Dallas sister Erica Badu once proclaimed, "I understand the game sometimes." And the other side of this dubious game of purposeful divestment is that it has left our community with limited opportunities for true, comprehensive economic success. Even in the midst of our pandemic predicament, the Center for Responsible Lending informs that roughly 95% of Black-owned businesses and 91% of Latino-owned businesses have been shut out of the Paycheck Protection Program and, quote, stand close to no chance of receiving a PPP loan through a mainstream bank or credit union. Trust now that we are not looking for a handout or a hand up. As a matter of fact, these hands are the hands that built this nation. It was these hands that erected this nation. If you remove us from the equation, you have nothing. All we demand now is equal opportunity to let us hold something from the economy we helped to build. We have the creative genius to bring a return that begets future returns. But let us hold something. Stop shutting us out from the very economy we helped build. Let us hold something. We have the talent, we have the ingenuity, we have the plan. All we need is the capital. As a matter of fact, we've come today in the spirit of Dr. King to cash a check owed to us by this nation. Let us hold something. For when you let us hold something, when you sing, when you return, you will see that God has given us a Jay-Z anointing to turn that 2 to a 4 and that 4 to an 8. Stop shutting the door in our faces. We demand a seat at the table. We demand full participation in the economic life of this nation. Let us hold something.
Let us hold something. My God. Everybody, this has been so full as we walk through these points of the Economic Bill of Rights. You can go to dallasblackclergy.com to continue to get information on this and continue to hear more about the Economic Bill of Rights and how you can preach and teach. All these sermons that you've heard, these sermonettes, the ones from our last one, we're going to have them live on our website so that you can use them as resources, so that you can use these sermonettes as resources, so you can use these scripture references as resources as you're talking about an economic bill of rights, as you're talking about how we move towards getting the things that we deserve for the hard work that we've put in to building this nation. I want to move the conversation forward. As we've talked about, we kind of level set it. What is an economic bill of rights? What's the history of it? And why are we even having this conversation? Then we moved and you heard from some of our great clergy on how do people of faith talk about this on Sunday morning in our midweek Bible studies, in our small groups. Now we want to move to a conversation with my dear sister, one of the greatest organizers in the country, Phyllis Hill. And she's going to be talking to us, and we're going to be talking a little bit about how we begin to organize our power. What is the role of the faith community? What is the role of people who look like us? And how do we begin to organize ourselves towards an economic Bill of Rights? So without further ado, I want to introduce to everyone my dear sister, none other than, I call her Reverend, she need to be a Reverend, but Phyllis Hill, the Director of Organizing for the Faith in Action National Network. Phyllis, would you just mind greeting the people for a second?
Hey, how y'all doing? First of all, it's a privilege to be on the phone call. Y'all need to put the donation link, because I was ready to give an offering, and I was ready to rededicate my life. You know what I mean? It's y'all, doing some powerful preaching. So thank you. You definitely have blessed me today. Today, though, I really do mean you have blessed me, because I'm from Georgia. I live here in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's been quite a difficult, at least 48 hours here in Georgia if you're Black. Just with Brother Ahmad, I see a picture of him on Dr. Waters' screen. This has been happening to us, and also with the reopening of the state, we already know that 40% of us, well, you're more likely to get the COVID. 40% chance likely now that the state has opened up, and we know that the majority of the people who are impacted by COVID are Black people. So it's been kind of, I saw a tweet where someone said they love the South, they love being from Georgia, but it's been tough to be both of those things today, particularly if you're Black. So you have definitely blessed my spirit today. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. I appreciate it. Thank you for bringing up our brother. I know you're in Georgia, and you're working very hard in Georgia and throughout the entire South, but working real hard in your own home, in your own home state, your own hometown, and trying to figure out how we continue to advance things for people who look like us and to make the country just a better place. So with that, I want to pivot. I want to ask you a question. With the work that you're doing, all throughout the country, and particularly in the South, you're not an economist, right? You're not like, that's not your gig, like it's not mine, but you have your hands and your finger on the pulse of a number of people who are trying to move things like this throughout the country. And so can you talk to us about the economic organizing that's happening throughout the South and around the country? Just give us a level set. What are people doing? What are people talking about?
Yeah. Okay. Well, before I dive into that, let me just say that I come from a really small town called Hazelhurst, Georgia, from Jeff Davis County. I always joke that we knew him by his informal name, Jeff, not by his formal name, Jefferson. That gives you kind of an idea about where I'm from. And I grew up primarily with my grandmother, who was a teacher in both the segregated and the integrated schools. And I remember being in her kitchen. I think I was around 7th grade, middle school. And she was basically saying that since we integrated, that we haven't really produced the amount of PhDs they did for Black students as they did in the integrated school, in the segregated schools. And I, of course, I thought I was smart, and no one could tell me anything. You really can't tell me nothing now either, but pray for me. But I remember I was just like, that can't be true, Grandma. Like, come on now, we in this integrated setting. But that always stuck with me. And it wasn't until I was doing like organizing in Minnesota around education issues, when we were going to superintendents and we were basically addressing the suspension rates and asking them to suspend suspensions, that I began it just clicked for me about what she was saying. And she was saying, we knew how to nurture and care for Black students. That was the thing. And when I put that question to superintendents, how do you care for and nurture Black students? They had no answer. Matter of fact, there was one Black man that was in the room that was a former principal who started crying because he was like, oh, I kind of get it. I kind of threw my children to this system. Mm. So I have to, reason why that story really sticks with me and I'm bringing it up, there is something that I heard all the fabulous history, the wonderful history from Dr. Green and Dr. Walker. And it's like, it's that history that we have to rely on, that we know what's best for ourselves. We know what's best for our children. And it's out of that, then we must build this economic plan, right? So I'm going to share some things with you, but I'm going to be honest with you. I think that we have yet to get to a place of stop asking for things that you may never get from people who don't tend to nurture or care for you.
Oh, hold
right?
on. Let me pause you right there. Bring that back, right? Stop asking for things from people who, tell us more about that, what you just said. Don't run past that.
Well, I think it's not necessarily I'm saying that we cannot participate in this economy, you know what I mean? Or that somehow, but there is something about having our own, you know? So when I think about, again, I cut my teeth in organizing in Minnesota, and we were doing this big rally around racial equity and jobs. And I learned quite a lot of things. And number one, like unions. There were these brilliant Black people who were inside of these unions, pushing the union and pushing the city around jobs. And they too were also members of congregations. But somehow we never made that link that there are these union members that were also people of faith. And then what would it mean to build something together or collectively out of the knowledge that they have? And so I was just beginning to think about, like, okay, there's a lot of greatness in the congregation. There's a lot of things that we can learn from. And so out of that, and kind of doing just some organizing and hearing different people, I think there is 5 things that Black people, we talk about it, but maybe we haven't really kind of concretized it and say, no, this is the thing that we're actually trying to build. And what do we actually own? So then those things are kind of the jumping off point, or they're the roots in which we can have an economic plan. So one of those things.
So before you jump into those things, because you're rolling on this, right?
Sorry.
No, you're doing good. No, you're rolling on this. But before you jump into those things, like, no. So what I'm hearing you say is, look, at the end of the day, right? We're talking about, like, Black people just like, when people talk about Black economics, like it's this magical, mystical thing, right? But all we're really saying is, no, we want to enter into the economics that are happening, right, with everybody else, unfettered, without getting beaten, without getting bruised. And then we find ourselves, so it's like we're trying to figure out how to do this. We're trying to figure out these magical things. And what you're simply saying is, look, they're in our congregations, right? The small business owner, they're in our congregation. The economists, they're in our congregation. They're a part of our fabric. They're a part of who we are. So before you jump into those 5 things, though, talk to us a little bit about just how you've seen across the South and across the country, how you've seen people interacting with these realities that you've laid out.
Well, I think that's the thing. In some ways, what I found in kind of the progressive world is kind of still lays outside of what I'm saying. So you have wonderful organizations, and I just think they're terrific. They're Black-led, majority of them are Black women-led, and they're talking about the things that are already discussed here. They're talking about raising the minimum wage, right, across the South. I think everyone is trying to do that. They're talking about providing grants and for small business loans and childcare providers. They're talking about paid sick leave, right? I know that you're talking about that in Dallas. They're talking about the investment in rural broadband, right? About how do we reach people that are in the rural parts. And not just rural doesn't mean white. Rural also means Black. So how are they reaching out to that? I think really what it all equals up to is that that's still something outside of us. Like, it's not to say that we can't ask for those things. And what I'm saying is that, but no, we already own land. Can we actually bring a cooperative economics, a cooperative funds through that? So even talking to one of the pastors here, he was like, he's saddened that in some of the denominations, preachers, pastors such as yourself, don't even have pensions, right? So I mean, they just we need pensions. We need to set aside money for economic and disasters. This COVID, this is not going to be the first time. This is the beginning, they say, right? Because of the environment. So what does it mean for us to be economically prepared to help one another, right? So I think that people are thinking about these things. I'm pretty sure that there's someone working on them. But to me, these are the conversations that I'm having with some pastors across the South. I would also say that right now, people are trying to work on addressing what it means for a lot of us to be unbanked, right? So, I know some people in Mississippi who are paying people's like internet or their phones or, things of that nature. And that's good because people need that, but they're really dealing with the underlying problem of people being unbanked. They're just out of the system, right? And those same people who are out of the system, I assure you, are probably the same people who are hit by gun violence, right? People who they did not receive the $1,200 or $800 coming from the government, right? They're not a part of the system. So how are we as Black people capturing those people, right? So that's kind of the conversation that I'm having with people across the South. It's like, how do we kind of build something different? And that doesn't mean that we're not asking for the things that I just named, but we have to build something totally different and reimagine what it means to be Black in America and have our own economy.
Wow. So what I'm hearing you say is, one, we need to, if we need to start being who God created us to be, right? And that is the creative brilliance and genius that come from just being Black in America.
That's right.
Start using it is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
What I'm hearing you say is we need to stop, or we not stop, but we need to add in, or maybe put to the front, not this idea of how do we go get these things that we don't have that are from the East or from the West. But we need to start having a conversation like, like God had with Moses, and God says,
what you got in your hand?
What's in your hand?
What's in your hand? Yes.
Looking at what's in our hand, right? What land do our churches own? What businesses do we have? Do we have
right.
in our communities that are owned by churches, and how do we begin to, do we have Black developers, and are they in our congregations? How do we simply aggregate the immense resources that we have and then wield that? That's what I hear you saying. Am I right?
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
Another question, because we're running short on time, and we like to start on time and end on time, but I really want to ask you this particular question. From you organize, clergy and faith leaders, and we organize other people outside of that, but that's really the core, right? Black clergy and faith leaders, that's who we really want to organize. What is the unique role, right, of the faith community, and what is the unique role of clergy, and particularly the Black church, in this fight towards an economic bill of rights and economic reenfranchisement?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's like, so let me go back to maybe the 5 things that help set it up. Mm-hmm. The things that we do own, and we know them quite well because many of you are products of them or you work at them right now, which is our own colleges and universities. Like, we need to build a pipeline for jobs. The times in which I have actually had extraordinary conversations with clergy across the South, we know what industries are lacking. And so it's like, well, instead of us asking for jobs or asking for somebody to produce them, why don't we produce them along with our HBCUs and building the pipelines, right? So that's like number 1. Number 2 would be, obviously, congregations are independent. And I just think that sometimes I don't think that we really kind of underscore that point. I know the AME Church does all the time. They do a good job of that. But but I also think that has to be extended to a lot of just Black congregations being that you are independent. I think that takes us to the third thing, which is we used to have a lot of Black newspapers, right? It's kind of like in this, how do we go back to that? Of course, it's going to look different in 2020, but we need our own like Black messaging, you know what I mean? Where we control the narrative and then we control the information. The fourth thing is that we really do need a Black independent unionized workforce, right? That's what we need. And then I would also say the 5th thing is we need Black political independent power. That's just, so I love the whole idea. I know that so many people on this phone call may be attached to like the Black Church PAC, but I just think that those are the things that are needed in our community to have a total independence. I think for clergy, it's about, I think, informing people of that independence. Like, that's the thing, that's the drive. I look to capitalism. Like, we have to figure out a new way of what our economy looks like for us. I think, and that's another thing too. Let's just say it, capitalism, you have to have somebody at the bottom. Someone has to be a slave. And as I think Minister Hall Sharp said, is that the majority of that is women. Women and children are going to be at the bottom. That's Black women and Black children. So we have to kind of reimagine that. I know that a lot of clergy are upset, and rightfully so, that they didn't receive the PPP money, right? That's true. You should be upset. And at the same time, it's about us opening so many other doors than just why didn't congregations get it? Or why didn't small businesses get it? No, it was like the whole Black community didn't benefit from it. You know what I mean? So in organizing, we typically talk about power, you know, okay. But it's all, sometimes that power is relegated just for us, right? Instead of like, no, it's for the whole community. We need Black independent power in terms of businesses, in terms of our schools, in terms of our congregations. All of us need to be aligned with one another. So how are we doing that? And I think that's the thing that I'm mostly interested in, is that how are we aligning ourselves? I don't think everybody can do everything, but I do think that there has to be an alignment of those forces.
Wow. And so that first, just, yeah. And we're going to need those 5 points. Can you put those 5 points in the chat so that we can make sure we all get it and get that out to people? Because people haven't heard, you know, I don't think people have heard things put that way. I know people haven't heard it put that way because it came from you, Prophet. But this is, I know I'm really serious. And what I'm hearing you saying about the church is that the church has a unique role in being able to lead and being able to coalesce, right? Where we have these multiple things sort of moving all over the place, but the Black church and the church itself has a role in leading it and being able to pull things together. That doesn't mean that the church has to own it all. And when we say, right, we're not saying that the church is like the president, right? We're not talking about some weird hierarchy, right? But what we're talking about is it's a place of coming together and a place of unity in the first place. So then how does the church step out first? And that's really what we're hearing and leading. Yeah, go ahead, Phyllis.
Yeah, I would just say one of the things, when I think about the South and talking about unionized workers, I think that the group who is making their mark on that right now are domestic workers. So there's a lot of domestic workers, kind of unions that are emerging. Those are primarily like queer-led. They're primarily like women-led, immigrant-led. And I think that what is missing is a relationship between the church and those groups of people. That doesn't mean that those groups of people don't go to church, right? Again, this is what I'm talking about, this kind of, we're not really in right relationship with one another, right? Around this. So what does it mean that across the South, like the people who are doing some great unionizing work happen to be women and women of color, Black women, you know? And I think that we have to do a better job at building those relationships. I would also say, I don't know too much about this and I'm very intrigued by this, what I'm about to say, but there's an organization here in Atlanta called Jobs for Justice. I know they're around, they're kind of like different organizations across the country, but they are partnering with Morehouse around jobs. And I just think that is the way to go, is like, how are Black people talking to Black people about the things that we need, because we know, again, going back to the nurturing care that my grandmother taught me. I just think that we're going outside of the community to get things that we want, instead of saying, no, how do we build it? That way, when we get to the table, as Dr. Waters talked about, now we have something to negotiate with. But we can't come to the table and we're at zero, right? They're just gonna kick us out. And in some ways, we probably have to do away with the table and build something that is our own.
Come on now. Well, let's give Phyllis a big hand. Come on, y'all. Let's give Phyllis a hand for just that. Thank you so much, Phyllis Hill, for that. I mean, you leaned into, Dallas Black Clergy is actually doing exactly that right now. If you go to our website and you look at our Build the City project, that's exactly what we're doing. We're starting with the land that we got. Pastor Jamie Calasar, who is on here, at his church, they have 40 acres of land at City Temple. Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes, who joined us. Let's give a hand for Dr. Haynes and make sure he joined us from a graveside funeral that he had to deal with today. And this is what our pastors are doing. They're going and being pastors and then trying to figure out how to come here and do this work as well. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Haynes. But they have 60 acres of land. And we've just been pulling together the Black community, Black developers, community leaders and partners to do what we call Build the City. We're using what we have. And then we plan to go to the city and ask them for the same money that every other developer asks for. We want the same tax breaks. We want the same grants. We want the same money. We want the same money that everybody else is getting, because we're not showing up with zero. We're showing up with over 100 acres of land, people, and we're going to raise our own money because we got it. and we can build wealth for ourselves. And we're going to make them stand up and take notice of what we can do as Black people coming together and being strong. And then we'll deal with what they're trying to do to us. But we're going to take care of ourselves and take care of our community. So thank you all so much. I want to move quickly. If you all give me about 3-4 minutes of overtime, I'll appreciate it. But we want to start talking about really quickly. Here are some resources, for today's conversation. Again, A Way Out of No Way. Lost it for a second. Where we go? Here we go. A Way Out of No Way, The Economic Prerequisites of the Beloved Community, written by Doc Green. Unfinished Business, Black Women, the Black Church, and the Struggle to Thrive in America, which is another great book that you can pick up on Amazon. And then there are a number of articles we have listed here. We'll make sure that those get put on our website, as well as sent out to all of you all who RSVP'd. So if you didn't get a chance to RSVP, go to DallasBlackClergy.com and RSVP so we can send you out that information so that you can have resources and stay connected with us. And then lastly, I want to go to just some next steps. Like I said, go to DallasBlackClergy.com and RSVP. We want you to share this conversation on your social media. We want you to share this conversation possibly as a special midweek or a weekend worship service. And then we want people to commit to preaching and teaching on the beloved economy with us. The last weekend, which in the Christian tradition is the Pentecost weekend, May 29th through 31st. And just think about preaching and teaching on this. And if you're looking for ways to do it, we're giving you the resources. We're giving you scriptures. We're giving you ideas. Use them. And since Doc was able to join us, Dr. Haynes was able to join us, I want him to just share with us really quickly on the Economic Bill of Rights, but from the angle of civic participation. And Doc, if you can just give us a quick few minutes and just talk to us about civic participation and how and the need for that in an Economic Bill of Rights. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you so much, Edwin. I don't know how you're supposed to follow Phyllis Hill. She is a phenom and a gift. Thank you so much, Phyllis, for blessing us. I'll simply say that if I were to put that in scriptural language, it's found in Joshua chapter 17, beginning at verse 14. But I introduce it with the story Michael Eric Dyson tells about Martin Luther King Jr. during the Chicago movement, where King used his platform to expose economic injustice and impoverishment. And according to Dr. Dyson, Martin King had moved under the West Side, the slums there in the West Side of Chicago, and he was leading a demonstration. And as many of you know, this white boy, this racist, spat on Dr. King. And so a brother from the West Side basically said, "You ain't gonna spit on our drum major," and got ready to go after the white boy. And check out what King said. King said, "Why are you upset about him spitting on me when policies that are passed every single day spit on your humanity, spit on the community, spit on our dignity as a people?" And so King was shifting the brother to understand that there are policies that are passed locally, statewide, and federally that spit on us every single day. The question becomes, if Michael Dyson is right, and that is that politics is about distributing resources, in too many instances, we are spat upon by politics, and that comes from both parties, the donkey and the elephant. The question becomes, if they're spitting on us, how do we respond? Well, right there in Joshua, resources, real estate is being distributed, and the Bible lets us know the descendants of Joseph say, y'all spitting on us because you passed us some real cheap real estate here in the promised land, and we're not going out like that. And after getting checked, said, yeah, you're right. You're a great people and you deserve a whole lot of land. And so what do we do in terms of engaging in unfettered access to policies and governmental structures? Well, the text lets us know these things that I'm done. It says to begin with, closed mouths don't get fed on this boulevard. Now that simply means you got to speak up and protest. That means you've got to show up and have enough self-respect to say, I ain't gonna go out like this. Closed mouths don't get fed on this boulevard. But then the second thing I learned, and that is, and it's so powerful, and that is, if you have any respect for your rich heritage, then you don't get played cheap in public policy. These are the descendants of Joseph, and we are the descendants of Harriet and Sojourner. We are the descendants of MLK and Medgar and Martin and Marcus. And so given all of that, in light of our rich heritage, we can't be played cheap when it comes to public policy. And then the final thing is, I got this from Reverend Jesse Jackson. He says, we need to see ourselves as bigger than we see ourselves. That's why Joshua said, you're not going to settle for this little piece of property. You're going to get a whole lot more. We've got to see ourselves as brilliant, phenomenal Black people who have a heritage of doing great stuff. And once we do that, the good news is we won't settle for being spat upon by public policy. I don't care if you call me the N-word, make sure your policies don't treat me like the N-word. And when we reach that mindset, we'll understand the brilliance of Drake. I got to close with Drake because Drake throws down like this when he says, when writing the story of your life, make sure you use your own pen.
And on that note, Reverend Dr. Irie Session, will you close us out of this phenomenal conversation?
I'll do the best I can. We were fortunate to hear an incredible historiographical account by Dr. Green on how we have not come to this conversation from nowhere. We come from and we're drinking from a deep well of activists, of strategists who have been talking about this economic community, this beloved economy for years. And so we are not speaking words and asking for something that is new to us, right? That is not new to our society. But for me, the question becomes, and I think I want to end and close with this thought, is what is it that is keeping Black folk from cooperative and collective economics, right? What are the barriers that we are and need to push back against within our own communities, within our own selves, because we keep asking, we keep demanding, we keep showing up, and we do. And there are many of us historically who have shown up, who have demanded, who have articulated visions, who have strategies, and yet we still find ourselves asking for what I like Phyllis Hill said, asking people for what we need, and people who have no intention of giving it to us. And so how can we be the change that we want to see in the world? What is keeping us from leveraging what is already in our hands? And so that is a piece that I think I want to encourage us to look at. What are barriers that we have created within our own communities that keep us from going to the same well and getting nothing out?
Thank you so much, Doc Session. And can you just give us a very quick word of prayer and send us all on our journey to answer those questions and continue the work that we all have together?
Absolutely. God in heaven, our mother, our father, our friend, We come to you right now seeking wisdom and seeking guidance, helping us, Lord, to indeed create and build the beloved community which thrives on the beloved economy. God, help us to understand within our own communities those barriers that are keeping us from leveraging what's already in our hands. And Lord, once you have us talk about it, but be about it, because we can be the change that we want to seek in this world. God, we give you glory, praise, and honor. Thank you for all that you have given us to do in this season of the life of the church. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all so much for joining. All of us with Dallas Black Clergy, I really appreciate it. Thank you to our special guests, Phyllis Hill, Dr. Theo Walker. Thank you both so much for joining us. Y'all, we're going to do this conversation again because we're going to keep building, and hopefully it'll keep building. So be looking out for information coming from us. I promise I'll send the right link next time and everybody will be okay. But thank you all so much for joining us. Love you so much and see you later. Peace.